Okay, so it's no secret I'm a really big fan of football. I played a little bit in high school, watch every NFL game I can, and I'm probably the biggest Bills fan you'll ever meet. I love the sport, and one of my favorite pastimes is playing it, but there's not always someone around to play with, so my Quest 2 and 2MD VR Football Unleashed have been a great alternative.
This game is so much fun. It's undoubtedly my favorite VR game, and many think the next step for football in VR would be some type of Madden-esque game, but I have to disagree with that. VR games really shine with arcade-like experiences, fun gameplay with a simple concept that players can grasp to allow them to interact with the virtual world, but it should be in small bursts, especially with a physically active game like this. Not only would a Madden game in VR contradict this, but its complexity and strategy also works against the VR realm's strengths. Also, defense would be so lame. You don't have much room to move around, so you just move with a stick and auto tackle. That's not much different than just playing on a TV. The only position more interesting in VR is quarterback, because you can actually throw the ball.
I'm not just here to crap on a Madden VR game though, I'm here to present a solution for the perfect virtual reality football game. But that's not to say 2MD is bad or anything. It does a really great job in a lot of areas, but it flat out omits a lot of what makes the sport fun. And that's where Retro Bowl comes in. Now, I usually hate mobile games, but the way this one approaches a shorter and more simple football experience is far better than 2MD. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm going to break this presentation of sorts into a few segments, first diving into what each game offers, starting with 2MD and moving on to Retro Bowl. Then I'll discuss which aspects of both of these games should be combined to create this ultimate VR football experience. Everything's nice and timestamped, so if you know the deal with one of these games already, feel free to skip ahead. Just note, 2MD's received a ton of updates since my original video on the game, so I do recommend you stick around to hear my thoughts on those.
If you're completely new to the game, 2MD VR Football Unleashed is a VR football game that puts you in the quarterback's shoes with 2 minutes on the clock down a touchdown. Your job is obviously to drive your team down the field and win the game, calling different plays, making clutch passes, and even running it yourself occasionally, and I found out you can stiff arm during these runs, which is fun as hell. Completing 3 passes in a row for positive yards rewards you with a hot streak, which not only increases the speed of your receivers, but also prevents the ball from being picked off, which is very handy. The throwing mechanics are really good in this game. Press the trigger to snap and hold the ball, move your arm as you would to throw, and release the trigger when you would release the ball. Super simple, but what's cool is that you can tweak the release height and throw power to make it feel exactly how you want. You adjust these settings in a training camp-esque facility, which is pretty nice. It sets up targets, hoops, and even a tic-tac-toe board for you to test your adjustments with. The locker room received major updates as well, including a larger focus on statistics. There's this board behind you that has a whole slew of information, including all-time completion percentage, touchdowns, picks, rushing yards, everything. And there's a clipboard that shows all the stats from your most recent series, which is pretty sweet. Though the highlight here is definitely the whiteboard for drawing up plays. This is probably my favorite thing about the game. You can bring your wildest route ideas to life and drop a dime for your receiver to grab. The only downside is that you can only have 8 of them, 1 for each direction on each stick, which is convenient in game, but just not a very big playbook. In my initial video, I said I wanted a way to test these plays before going into one of the leagues, and they've since added a practice mode. But unfortunately, you have to leave the mode to adjust your plays, then enter again to retest them, which means 2 loading screens and a quite ridiculous buffer between drawing and testing. Besides that though, I do like this practice mode. It provides a really good simulation of the real deal, without having to pause between rounds, and the music is bopping. And with that, they added some additional leagues. Before it was just the Robot League and the Dummy League, now there's a ton of them, and each one provides a moderately different experience. They even added this Halloween one where the ball becomes a pumpkin and all the players become skeletons, which is really freaking cool. The stadium's got some renovations too. Quite a few of them have cool gimmicks, different weather effects, a dummy vision screen with a great angle of each play, and even a complimentary new track. And while I said the championship theme was my favorite initially, I think I have to retract that statement. It's still a solid tune, but quite a few tracks have given it a run for its money, and the Skins theme has by far surpassed it for me. So yeah, there's a lot of content in this game, and for $15, it's a really solid experience for the Quest that I recommend to anyone who even remotely likes the sport. That doesn't mean I don't wish some things were done differently though, and that's where Retro Bowl comes in. This is like the perfect football game to take on the go. It's so simple, but it's straight up fun and consumable in small bursts, just like a VR game of this caliber should be, but it takes a totally different approach. But first, let's address that name. It clearly took some inspiration from the NES classic Tecmo Bowl, and the visuals have a striking resemblance as well, but that's where similarities stop. Gameplay feels totally different, and you don't even play defense. Instead, it just has text pop up to give you a brief play-by-play, which I actually prefer. I've never been too big a fan of playing defense, so the game doing it for me is just fine. It gets me back to being QB quicker, and that's what I want. 2MD doesn't have you play defense, but the way it goes about it just doesn't make sense. Like, the first 4 rounds you're down 1 score and a touchdown ends the game, but rounds 5 through 7 have you down 13, and for some reason, when you score once, you get the ball right back. Within the parameters of the game, it makes sense, but that's not how it would actually go down in a real game, and it's kinda immersion breaking, but that's really the only way they could do it, so I guess guess it's fine. But that's why having the structure of each round resemble a full game with shortened quarters as opposed to a 2-minute drill benefits a game like this substantially, and that's exactly what Retro Bowl does. 2 or 3 minute quarters, that's it. Games take less than 10 minutes and are fun all the way through. And the control scheme is really freaking good for a mobile game. You pull your thumb away from the QB and aim the trajectory of the ball where you want it and let it go to fire. The game just got updated a few weeks ago to allow bullet passes too, and you just tap the screen with your other thumb and release as normal to throw one. It definitely takes some getting used to, but once you get it down, making every pass you need to is a breeze and very satisfying to pull off. When a reception is made, you seamlessly transition to controlling the receiver. Swipe up or down to move that direction and forward to dive, which works great. But you don't always have to pass. You can hand the ball off by tapping your running back or take off for a QB run by aiming your throw backwards. Everything's very comfortable to use and I don't have any complaints. Another thing I really like about this game is how teams are handled. First, you can play as any NFL team, but they obviously don't have the rights to them, so they refer to them as the city and use the same colors. But it's clear it's the Buffalo and the Los Angeles. They aren't fooling anyone, but it's a pretty smart workaround. I'm not saying this needs to be in a VR football game, but it would be pretty cool. What I like most though is how the game actually gives you a roster with a salary cap and a limited amount of slots. Your team starts off as a bunch of no-names, but when you complete a season, you get to a 3-round draft and get to scout and sign players, which adds a whole new element to the game. These players all have names, stats, strengths, and weaknesses, and it makes it feel way more like you're on a team. Sure, it adds a fair amount of complexity to the game, but only here and there, which is how it should be. It's a pick up and play thing until the season ends, then you gotta re-sign players, draft new ones, and balance your salary cap, which I enjoy doing. I don't really know how that would work in VR though, I'm just throwing the idea out there. I mean, there is an Oculus app, maybe they could in some way tie that in with the game and allow you to handle drafts, trades, and things like that on your phone. That would be really cool. Okay, now that I've laid out the majority of what these two games offer, let's move on to how combining their best elements could create the perfect VR football game. Import the throwing mechanics from 2MD, they're pretty darn perfect, and of course, let the player drop their own plays and coordinate their offense. 8 plays is not enough though, so I think it would be huge if they allowed you to store plays in a playbook. You could keep your 8 favorites on the sticks, but maybe one of those buttons that don't do anything could bring up a menu with your whole arsenal of save plays. It would take more time to access them, but you've still got the more important ones on hand. The option to use the others would just be nice, and after an incompletion, taking extra time doesn't matter. Keep the practice mode, but move the whiteboard for play design into it so you can make those necessary adjustments more efficiently. And of course, the training camp thing with the throw power and height alterations should be there too. Now to the actual game. I want the score to start 0-0 with 2-minute quarters and the other team to actually play offense, which should be summarized in text and keep the game moving. You could put the view on the sideline, be able to whip up some new plays, maybe even toss the ball around with the bot, and have the ability to skip the text if you want to get back to the action faster. I know this still takes some time and might be seen as annoying, but at the very worst, it's still better than waiting through a loading screen after every touchdown like in 2MD. But if you're not actually playing as the defense, you need some kind of way to control their performance, which can be done through managing a roster and selecting defensive players to go out there and make plays. It's not the best solution, but it would work and give each defense some strengths and weaknesses. The main event is definitely when you're quarterback though, and having a roster for offense would make this a lot better too. Having receivers with different speeds and catching abilities would add so much to the game and make it way more immersive. Do not cut to the receiver or running back's perspective when they get the ball though. There's an option for that in 2MD and it does not work. Overall though, the core offensive gameplay in 2MD is really good. It just feels so shallow and that's all there is to each round, and the game of football has so much more to it. But hang on, there's one thing both of these games are lacking that I think would work really well in a game like this, and that's online play. Now, online play is just about the furthest thing from smooth on the Quest, but the approach I just explained would work near perfectly. Since only one player is actually playing on the field at a time, there wouldn't need to be a super strong connection like in real-time games. The player on the sidelines could just have a screen next to them that says 15-yard completion, first down, or 5-yard sack, 3rd and 7 after each play. This would be manageable with the worst of connections. Maybe a stronger connection could have it going on live, but I don't know how well that would work. Sure, it would be kind of boring to wait your turn, but as I said earlier, you'd have a couple things to do on the sidelines, but there would definitely need to be more done to keep the game moving. The addition of online play would be massive for a game like this, and I think if it were to be done this way, it would be a very smooth experience.
So yeah, that's my ideal VR football experience. Don't know if anything like this will ever come out, but give this video some love to hopefully get the idea in front of the right people. Who knows? And please, drop any other additions you may have to this concept down in the comments. I would love to discuss this with you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video until the end. If you enjoyed it and want to see more, be sure to subscribe and check out some of my other videos. This one was a lot of fun to make, so if you've got any other suggestions for VR games I should make videos about, let me know down below. Thanks again. I'll see you later.